option of when I was going to do my undergrad, it's like, am I going to major in computer science and mathematics, or am I going to major in music? And so for me, I'm a cellist, and I'm an orchestra conductor. And I already know that there's not a lot of people that look like me that do what I do. I mean, I wear Argyle socks every day, so it is what it is. But that really does help. But no, seriously though, I know that it, just like my colleague right here, you know, I know that I'm one of the few people that do what I do, and I know that I'm inspired when I see somebody that looks like me doing what I want to do. And I know that, you know, as being originally from St. Louis, Missouri, I can look at Alvin McCall saying, I could actually play with the St. Louis Symphony one day, which was awesome to me. And one of the reasons why I chose to do all of this. Now, for me, I could have been completely oblivious during my undergrad because I was more concerned of, I need to do a 4 pattern, this is music theory, I need to learn how to play the Shostakovich Cello Concerto. But at the end of the day, as I got older, then I look back at all the things I've done, I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many potholes that I completely just skipped over because I'm so concerned about getting to the end of the journey. Now that I'm here in this doctoral program, I now see there's all of these potholes and nobody has filled them. I'm putting on my hard hat and I'm ready to fill these holes and basically bring people like, hey, by the way, you missed all this. You know, so that's kind of my take.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a second question. So after, you know, I was in the middle of my study, sort of pulling my hair out, this is not going to change, but we're going to, okay, so how can we just reimagine family, right? So that women and the students that they serve can really thrive. So these are some current ideas and practices that I know colleagues are doing, colleagues of mine in the Southern California area, or ones that I have read about or met through conferences, or these are things that I'm doing that I think have been successful. They're all messy. None of them work right away. They're all in flux, but they're all messy. Okay. So the first one, creating or embracing ensembles with atypical instrumentation. You're either making that effort to invite students who don't play the instruments that are traditional, right? And this happened to me quite a bit. I remember one year I had 3 electric bass players in concert band. I didn't have any trombones. Do you want to play trombone? No. Okay. You know, and I will take any kid who wants to play, and I will make it work. And again, messy, because I've got to figure out parts and where, you know, what's their ability level. And then the embracing of ensembles. For example, I have an orchestra at my school with, let's see, last year I had 1 trombone, a cello, a clarinet, a flute, a pianist, 1 viola, and 2 violins. Now that's not horrible, right? We can make that work. But I don't know any music that's written for that instrumentation. So I did a lot of rewriting and zhuzhing and, you know. And in the end, we wound up, had a student who wanted to do some music from a movie. And we wound up doing this recording a la the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, and it was pretty amazing. Including students who do not read music. So I have a colleague in San Diego who has a steel pan band, and she has students that don't read music working with students that do read music. And she lets them figure it out on their own. And she's sort of the guide on the side. And it's messy, but it does work. And the students learn how to communicate, because after all they want to do is make music together. Okay? No podium. I don't conduct from a podium anymore, and I understand practical reasons why we do it. If you're standing in front of 50 or 60 kids, you can't be seen. You know, that's all that. But I don't use a podium anymore, and I like that because I can move around. I can, you know, find that kid who's the 3rd violinist in the back and, you know, make better eye contact. Student-led ensembles, a la the Orpheus Chamber Ensemble or Kaleidoscope, which we have in Los Angeles. This is also very messy, but it's very cool. And if you're willing to stick with it, it can be very, very empowering for the kids. Because you're like, okay, you guys have it. And you step out of the way and they're like, wait, what? But they figure it out. Slowly, they figure it out. Alternate seating. So it's not the same kid who's playing first violin all the time. I have a colleague who's doing this And she has all of her violins learn all 3 parts, and they rotate. So it's not that same kid who's playing 3rd violin in the way back. They get to come up and play 1st violin, and very often they're sitting next to a kid who's a lot better than they are, but they work together, they learn how to communicate. That kid who's sitting in the 3rd row gets a much better experience, and that kid who's used to being concertmaster or playing 1st, also gets a better experience. It's randomized, by the way. And the kids, she does it for concerts. I don't know if she does it, but she does it on concert days. It's pretty amazing. Alternate seating, so not everybody's sitting in their same section. You sit in a square, you sit in a circle. This is this is pretty common. And then obviously making sure that you're performing music by composers who are women and people of color. Kaleidoscope does an incredible job with this, and they're a really great model. I'm lucky to live in an area, the LA Philharmonic not only promotes music by women composers, they have a lot of women conductors coming through every year. Even the Pasadena Symphony, I was looking at the music by new composers that they're doing, and over half of them are women composers. The Pasadena Symphony, you know? So it's starting to happen, but these are some of the things that I've been doing or colleagues have been doing. I'm curious, does anybody else know or hear about things that are happening?
Well, I was just going to say, Pasadena, there's also the non-professional orchestra that's led by women.
I'm just hearing about it.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, so it's a community orchestra,
Okay.
has a female conductor.
Oh, no, wait, yes. Yes, I know who that is. I'm sorry. Yes, I know who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
So I had a person that plays the viola that was a band teacher, and so all the things that you were describing about with her lifestyle was exactly how her
Oh, great.
lifestyle was. No children, because band was everything.
Yep.
No day off, because she had to be there for the.
What are some other things we could be doing? Or what's happening?
So I'm just gonna be honest, like my current teaching situation does not include large ensembles, so the only ensembles I deal with are smaller and kind of non-traditional, so I fully realize this is not always like possible if you have a huge group and it's just you, but because I'm coming from experience, this person has only ever really done jazz band, and I wasn't like a marching band kid or a band director. I think how the time in the band is structured has a lot to do with that too.
Sure.
Because if you are at a podium or just being directing the whole time, it's kind of hard to tell what students need. Obviously, the larger group is harder to check in with them, but in my small group, I allow time for a little bit of practice, a little bit of learning through it. And if you have a lot of kids and there's a lot of brass, for example, that's going to be really noisy, so you might want to tweak that. But I think just having that structure, of course, that cuts into rehearsal time, and so there's always a deadline for a concert or whatnot. But it's another possibility depending on the situation.
It's messy.
It's messy.
It's messy. Yes.
I have a question. I'm wondering about competition and a tradition of adjudication in festivals and how that scenario fits into this scenario, because I love all of these ideas.
Right.
But I know that competition is a big part of a lot of band programs, specifically marching band programs, and I'm wondering if that is adding to this problem or detracting from. I'm just curious. I don't have the answer to that, so.
Well, in terms of competition, I was just going to add, you had kind of a question about that. What I would do with I was an orchestra teacher and also a band teacher, but I wouldn't be on the stage with the students. They performed everything by memory, and I would actually sit in the audience and have them do the whole competition without my being there and led by students. So I think you just have to be willing to take risks and not care about the outcomes and just, I had people that loved how I did the performances and others that couldn't understand why my students were dancing, Irish step dancing and playing at the same time when we were an orchestra and we weren't supposed to be dancing. And so, but I didn't really care at that point.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, in my first teaching job, shame on me for this, I had a student that came up wanting to be in band, but they played the violin. And I asked my college professors, hey, what should I do? We go to, this competition, how does, they're like, you can't let that kid be in band. And I didn't, shame. In the second year, I said, this is ridiculous because we didn't even do well. We didn't play well enough, so I was like, forget that, and we didn't go, and then I let the kid in band. So, I mean, you have to be bold enough to definitely take the risk and do it.
Well, the year that I had the 3 bass players in concert band, and we went to festival, on the adjudication sheet, I got dinged because those kids were playing bass.
Yeah.
And, so the thought about going to festival and the competition thing, that's a whole other question, which we don't have time for. But, I want to make sure you get your time, so I'm going to pass this on. Still my water.
I wasn't gonna drink it. I'm just gonna yes and everything that was just said. Say yes, all of that, and I'm gonna apply it to my work in the jazz world, which is, I could speak ad nauseum about how it's unfortunate that the jazz world and the music education world feel very separate, but we're going to accept that and move on for a moment. Before I show you this video, I just want to give you a little bit of context. So, I work for Jazz House Kids, which is a nonprofit jazz education organization in Montclair, New Jersey. We have been running for about 16 years, and about 6 years ago, we developed a program called Chica Power, which I did not name. I could also do a whole presentation about the problems of that name, but here we are. So what it is it's an all-female learning environment for jazz education. And it has becoming a bunch of different things that I'll get into later, but it was basically when it was started by our founder, Melissa Walker, we had one girl in our top ensemble, because we have ensembles that rehearse outside of the school days and auditioned elite experience, and we had one girl in our top band. And she said, oh, Zoe, like, how's things going? And she's like, well, wish I wasn't the only girl here. And she was like, maybe we should change that. It probably does kind of suck. And now Zoe is in her second year of her master's in jazz at Juilliard, and we're very proud of Zoe, but she is but one. And we're trying to make more Zoes in the world. And I'm gonna let them talk. So this is a 3-minute video of our students talking about the Chica Power experience, which hopefully you can hear well.
There was a lot of guys that were playing drums. I was shy, I was afraid to play. I thought I'd never get my shot or never get my chance.
In my band program, there are only 2 female musicians.
I didn't know that a woman could be a leader in jazz. Boys are told more often that it's okay to make a mistake. Girls are told that, like, you don't want to fail, you want to be perfect.
Being a male in jazz is so normalized. For a female to be in the jazz world, it takes a little more courage.
Whisper, you guys nailed it under Anna's break. Just wanted to put that out there.
Because I ended up going to Chica Power, they have encouraged me to push past what other people would like for me to believe.
Chica Power is a program that we started at Jazz House to help more girls get involved in instrumental jazz, but it's also a mindset of female empowerment and female involvement in jazz.
If you make a mistake, it's wrong. Proud, whether you're right or wrong.
Chica Power is a group of women and girls telling you that it's okay to fail. It's really just a support system that picks you back up and helps you succeed at the end of the day. When a lot of people who are actually involved in the jazz world come and speak to us about their experiences.
And it does encourage young females to see musicians that look like them.
I'm excited. They're always very, very encouraging, and they tell you, like, you can do it, you guys are the start of a new era.
If you're a girl and you want to play an instrument, you walk into a room of people playing jazz, and you're the only girl there. I would sort of ask myself, what am I doing here? Yeah, we can do what they can do, but we're at the same level as we are. It's great because girls need spend.
Has anybody recorded in a studio like this before? Today we are recording for the Jazz House Kids album.
This is a full band with women. Not a lot of people have heard that before.
And so to be able to see other instrumentalists that share the same craft as I do is very empowering and encouraging, and I love every bit of it.
1, 2, 1, 2,
I have more confidence in myself to go out there and be a leader, and I really do think that it will change who's in jazz in the future.
It has the possibility to really change the face of young musicians who are going into the jazz world, and you're seeing more women get involved.
Society will tell you different things all day, but it's just what you think of yourself is more important than how somebody else may view you.
I don't want to make this into like a dog and pony show about Chica Power. It's not why I'm here, but it is kind of it's what I do, and it's kind of an informal way to research this issue. So here's what we knew when we started Chica Power. There's a great study by Erin Ware Flowers talking about how there's a substantial social and emotional factors that contribute to low female participation in jazz improvisation. And when I say jazz or jazz improvisation, I'm kind of talking about the culture of jazz and jazz improvisation in general, but I'm just going to jazz much shorter. Only 12% of our student body was female, which is pretty darn low. So if you think about a room full of 25 students, on average only 3 of them would be girls, so it's pretty small. And the majority of those girls who were participating in our program were the younger students, so they were in our Louis Armstrong track, another dude. So that was our youngest, students who were in 5th and 6th grade, kind of dipping their toe into jazz, and then we wouldn't hear from them once they hit high school, most of them. Our students had very few female role models to look up to. And it's difficult hiring female faculty when you're trying to find great jazz musicians, okay, that's a bucket, and then you're trying to find great jazz musicians who are great teachers, a much smaller bucket, and then you're trying to find women who are great jazz educators, very small bucket. And if you want to try to find female jazz musicians who are great educators and are available and willing to teach at your summer workshop, 2, very, very small bucket to look through. And then only 3 girls had ever made it into our top ensemble by the time we had started this program. Before I get into a little bit deeper, just a show of hands, how many of you would identify as a jazz musician? Great. How many of you have been to a jam session? How many of you have participated in a jam session? Okay, great. So we got a little mix here. So if you've never been to a jam session before, it's kind of I would say the pinnacle of the jazz experience. You're probably going to a club. It's probably way after dark. There's probably a lot of drinking. There is a unspoken, typically cultural practice of a jam session that's different depending on the club that you go to. So you really, if you don't know, you'll never know sort of thing. It's not very friendly to newcomers in a lot of situations. So if you are a young person or you don't look like the people who are running the jam session, you're probably going to be scared out of your mind. And what you have to do at a jam session is somebody's going to call a tune, so somebody's going to pick the piece that you're going to play, tune that you're going to play. If you don't know it, you can't hang. And if you try to muddle through it, you're going to be asked to move off the stage, either politely or impolitely, or just not not asked to solo or not looked at to solo. And if you would like to solo and not just play the head, you have to make that known. And if you don't know how to do that, or you don't feel confident enough to do that, which typically literally involves you moving in front of the person who's playing, which is not something you can do if you're a shy person or you don't think that you should be taking up that space, you can't hang at that jam, or any jam. So I'm saying all of these things because taking up space, moving in front of somebody who's supposed to be the person in power, doing all of those things, saying something that's not, on a scripted page in front of you, you literally have to come up with it off the top of your head, and everyone is judging you on your chops. There's a bunch of stuff that girls are not socialized to do. As was said in the video by one of our students, girls are socialized to be small and to not take up space, to be quiet, to not make mistakes, and you cannot be successful in jazz if you can't break away from those things. You can't. You will, sure, you can be in your high school's jazz band and not take a solo, but that's pretty much as far as you can get. You can't be a professional jazz musician that way. So, that's what we knew to start, that the odds are stacked against a girl who wants to be a professional jazz musician, or even just a really good jazz musician who does it on the side. Your odds are stacked against you. A lot of things are pushing against you. Not to mention everything that was said already by our other lovely panelists. So this is what our students taught us over the last couple of years, and this is an important part of Chica Power for me as I run it, to get that feedback from them, because this is a program for them. It's not for me. I don't, of course I want to see more women in jazz, but they're the people we're doing this for. Their feedback and their experience is paramount. So what they've taught us is that they want high expectations and they want to be taken seriously. And of course we knew that before, but they said that so explicitly to us, and especially would tell us that other male faculty members at the Jazz House have treated them differently or had a different expectation of them because they were women, or young girls. And they knew that, and they felt that, and they hated it. They hated it. What they also taught us is that they felt like an all-female environment was important and was valuable to them. So the crown jewel of the Chica Power program is our 7-week residency. And it's not an audition program, it's free thanks to some really miraculous donors. And so there's really, all we ask is that you can attend all of the sessions, and that you've been playing your instrument for at least a year. And that's pretty much all of the expectations. And so every year we completely sell the program. There's 50 students that we somehow cram into our studios, and we break them up into different ensembles, and they perform at the end. All of our faculty are women, all of our staff are women, and all of our guest artists are women. So it's a completely female environment, and they really enjoy it. And they also appreciate having a clearly defined support system and safe place. So we say very explicitly, you're going to do things during this program that are going to scare you, and you should do them anyway. It's scary, do it anyway. You're going to fail, you're going to do stuff that is bad and wrong. Good! We are here to support you, we're here to pick you up. And they really, really value having that explicit conversation about, yes, you can do it, the first step on the road to being good at anything is being bad at it. So be bad here, that's fine. And they also tell us very often, and it hurts sometimes, that there's a lot of work left to do in our own Chica Power programs, at the Jazz House, and everywhere else in the universe. There's still a lot of work to do. So we think about Chica Power as a happy little bubble where there's only women, and we deal with all of these issues, and we have a space to talk about all of these things that make them anxious outside our little bubble. But they can't, the world is not our happy little Chica Power bubble. The world is co-ed, the world has a lot of things that are working against them. So all of the things that I'm thinking about for continuing and improving the Chica Power program are how to succeed outside the bubble and improving the world outside the bubble. So creating a supportive environment for all of our students. So when we have Chica Power sessions at our summer workshop, we have them during our lunch periods, and all of the girls come in and we have speak to our guest artist, and it's no boys allowed, which makes the boys very uncomfortable. And they often say, well, why isn't there Chico Power? And I'm like, well, we're having lunch, we're just having lunch. You get the rest of society. We're just gonna have lunch, thank you. But it got me thinking, we can't just have our happy little bubble. We need to involve the boys and involve our faculty in the discussions that we're having. And for the very first time at the end of last year, we had a master class that was sponsored by Chica Power, but was open to everyone in our community. And brought in saxophonist Roxy Koss, who is wonderful, and she runs the Women Jazz Organization, or WEJO, in New York. And she told some stories about how she's also married to another tenor saxophonist, and they both took a lesson from the same tenor player. She would not tell me who it was, and said that their experiences of this lesson were very, very different. And that when her husband was taking the lesson from this guy, he, it seemed that this, the teacher expected him to sound like this, and he sounded like this, so he was like, oh, well, you need to do da-da-da-da-da-da, you need to do all of these things, you need to do all these things, you know, you need to get it together. When she took a lesson with him, he was expecting her to sound like this. She sounded like this. So he was like, ah, you sound great. Have a nice day, basically. Didn't really get feedback. Because the expectations were so low, she didn't get what she needed or deserved out of this lesson that she probably paid the same price for. And so that story being heard not just by our girls who are going, oh great, this is what I have to look forward to, but having our male faculty members hear that, they were like, oh, huh. And I'm hoping, and I will make this a little bit more explicit, that they need to, that as an educator you need to examine a male or female or anything in between. As any educator you need to examine, am I creating different expectations for different students in my program? And it's a hard conversation to have with yourself. And in fact, a student who we just hired out for a gig reported back to me, she was like, some of the other students were saying that the way that we hired these students for the gig was different from the way that you talked to the boys. And they felt that it was because we were women, you didn't think that we could hustle on this gig. And I was like, no. No, and I, the one who runs the Chica Power program, who's supposed to be the queen feminist, like, I had to stop and go, okay, I really need to think about this. So everybody really needs to think about, how am I talking to all of my students? Is this really am I really doing the best that I can? Be kind to yourself and make changes. That's the best way to do that. I could talk about this for ages, so I'll just move on. Okay, continuum of sport for graduates. So when we do have students who are graduating from our programs and going off into college, college is hard for everybody, no matter what your major is and no matter what you're doing. We need to continue to support those students in their undergraduate programs in jazz so that they're getting a degree and finishing. A lot of jazz undergraduate students don't finish their degree in general. And being a woman in the jazz program where you're the only female in your entire undergraduate program is not a very friendly place to be. I want to start expanding our work into school programs and training for music educators. That's why I'm here. How to create safer spaces. I was just at the New School earlier this week talking with their jazz department. And somebody from WEJO, who wasn't Roxy Koss, who's doing some research. And this is preliminary research, this is not official yet, do not quote me on this, I probably should be quoting her. But she was telling us that she was doing some research, some surveying of professional female jazz musicians, asking them like what they've encountered in the jazz space and on the scene. And when asked the question, have you ever been harassed by or assaulted by somebody on the jazz scene, it was almost 95% of women said yes. So when I talk about safe, I'm not just talking about like, you know, the ability to make a mistake. I'm talking about physical assault that can occur. And any of that is completely unacceptable. Almost 95% makes me physically feel ill and is ridiculous and all of the words. So this is not a statistic that I'm going to be telling our sixth graders, obviously, but it's something that if we're trying to encourage our middle schoolers and high schoolers to pursue this as a profession, there's a whole continuum of issues and professional workplace issues that need to be, starting to be addressed. But at the other end of the spectrum, encouraging beginners to seek more elite experiences. So as I was saying at the beginning, we had 12% of students were girls, and they were always like the itty bitty little kids, and one girl in our top ensemble. As students, and this is great reading the Ware Flowers research, as students hit puberty and they start realizing like, I'm a girl, that's very different from being a boy, if they perceive any activity as being male, then they don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to be seen as doing something that's male. So they will start to distance themselves and think, this isn't for me, it's not for me. I mean, if you think about, here's an exercise. Close your eyes for a second. Think of a jazz musician. Okay, open your eyes. Who thought of a guy? Yeah. So you, yes, Ella Fitzgerald, but she's a vocalist, and there's plenty of female vocalists, and they need, yes. I was going to say was. Yes. This is a whole issue that we have in Chica Power too, is like, why don't we have more vocalists that are involved in Chica Power? Our vocal program in Jazz House Kids has a lot of issues in and of itself, so it's kind of like a political issue right now. But women need to be supported no matter what their instrument is, and especially, typically if, in a lot of jazz ensembles, if you have one girl in the program, it's probably your vocalist. And that's actually was my jazz experience in high school, as I was the vocalist, and you are treated very differently if you are a vocalist or if you are the only woman. Both of those, holy cannoli, forget it. Like, you're not gonna feel like you're part of the band. So anyway, encouraging beginners to seek elite experiences. As the students get older and older, they start to think, well, this is less and less and less for me. They drop out of jazz band, and by the time you get to college, very, very tiny amounts of girls who are still seeking